Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Coding Talk Livestream. I'm your host, Jim Kunkle, and today we're discussing a topic that's generating conversations across every corner of the protective coatings industry. Next generation coatings inspectors closing the competency gap. Now, you've probably heard the phrase before, but it bears repeating it because it gets to the heart of today's discussion. Certification gets you in the door. Competency keeps you in the industry. For decades, our industry has relied on certification programs to establish a baseline of knowledge and credibility. And these programs have helped thousands of professionals begin a successful career in coatings, inspection, quality assurance, quality control, and asset protection. Now, associations such as ICOR, AMP, and others have played an essential role in developing training pathways and creating standards that elevate our profession. But as valuable as certification is, a certificate alone doesn't prepare someone for everything they encounter in the field. Now, today's coatings inspector is entering into a world that looks very different than the one that many veterans started in. You know, we're facing an aging workforce and the retirement of experienced inspectors who carry decades of practical knowledge. At the same time, coating systems are becoming more sophisticated. Project specifications are more demanding, and the owner's expectations are higher than ever before. And then there's documentation. Today's inspector isn't just expected to inspect coatings, they're expected to capture data, generate reports, manage digital documentation, communication with multiple stakeholders, and also understand quality systems that often navigate technologies that didn't even exist years ago. In short, the industry isn't just asking for inspectors, it's asking for highly competent technical professionals who can think critically, communicate effectively, and make sound decisions under real-world conditions. So the question becomes, how do we bridge the gap between certification and true field competency? And how do we help the next generation develop not just technical knowledge, but professional judgment? And what's the responsibility that employers have, that mentors, trainers, and seasoned inspectors have in preparing the next workforce that will protect the infrastructure of tomorrow? To help me and help us better explore these questions, I'm really excited to bring on today's guest, Dylan Goddard, a coatings performance specialist with Seaspan Corporation. And he's also a small business owner that's developed a unique perspective on workforce development, inspector competency, and the realities of today's coatings industry. So, Dylan, before I tag your I also want to ask everyone who's watching this live, this one question: what's the biggest skill gap that you're seeing in new coatings inspection today? Dylan, welcome.
Hi, Jim. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and very excited to be here today. I'm a big fan. I've watched you and followed you for many years in the industry back in the SSPC days and my early inception into SSPC and NACE as CIP1 and various other field certification tickets that I took on early in my career. So very happy to be here today and appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
For the one person who might not know who you are, could you talk a little bit about your background and maybe talk a little bit about your company and what you do in addition to working in the field?
Sure. So my background is specifically on the marine side. I will say born and raised in ship repair, shipbuilding. Entered into the ship repair business when I was 16, 17 years old on afternoon shift. And I never looked back. Got the opportunity to see the business of fast moving ship repair and very intriguing. Ended up getting into the applicator side as a coder, blaster, painter, Did that for several years and then realized, hey, there's quite a bit to this. I'm very interested in the technical side of the trade, and ended up obtaining my Red Seal Canadian certification in the trade, entered into several various applicator programs, and then got into the CIP 1, 2, 3. At that time, they had also SSPC 1, 2, 3, which is now been combined with the AMP program. And yeah, so I developed through the ranks within the ship repair industry, became supervisor, senior supervisor, and then ultimately management. Kind of hit my ceiling there back in 2023 and decided, okay, I'm going to venture out, start my own business as a coating inspector and consultant. I did so and was able to fortunately come under some very experienced, strong mentorship with a very close industry friend of mine. And ended up moving to Vancouver. Through that opportunity, I was able to engage with Seaspan Corporation, and into my current role now as the coating performance specialist with Seaspan Ship Management. So very, it's been an interesting ride so far, and I feel like I'm just getting started.
You're definitely just getting started. What a great journey to have. Dylan, let's talk about what actually makes a competent coatings inspector. And the years that I've had the opportunity working in the field and also working in associations like SSPC and my time when I worked at AMP, I had an opportunity to work with so many incredible coatings inspectors that are out there. And a lot of them were incredible instructors, and also they were just champions of the industry and, presenting at conferences or writing technical papers, or like I said, being out in the field and actually working in conjunction with them. What I've come to kind of define some core pillars of competency for a very good coatings inspector. The first is the technical knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I think that's super critical. When it comes to technical knowledge, what recommendation would you have to someone who's going into a level 1, they're looking to move from being a technician and they want to take that next part of the journey to get themselves to a experienced senior type of coatings inspector? What technical knowledge should they be acquiring?
Well, first and foremost, you must understand the technical part of the business in terms of the standards and how to apply them in the field. But in parallel, you also need that field experience to understand how to apply them in real world scenarios. When you read it out of the textbook, I can tell you in certainty that it's not how it goes out in the field. There's a lot of curveballs that come your way, and there's a lot of situations that you get put in as an inspector that you must navigate and maintain your integrity, maintain your position, regardless of who you're working for, on what side, owner, contractor, so forth. So in terms of technical knowledge, I would just say, know the standards and know what you don't know, right? Like, you don't know everything. I learn stuff every day. I'm not a concrete guy. I'm a marine guy. So happen to have the opportunity to learn about concrete. So I delve into that, and I use those resources and use the resources around you to extract that information from those who know, right? So. Yeah,
that's great. Great recommendation for everyone, because you're 100% truth on that. When you're talking about, you have the theory, the science, but when you get into the field, it's kind of like Scotty with Star Trek. Sometimes the laws of physics get bent out there in the field. And that's my second pillar, is really practical field experience, the hands-on. For a coatings inspector to be very effective, they have to really understand what the contractor's production, what they go through, understand related to environmental conditions and certain situations that can occur when you're doing any type of industrial coating work out there. So the practical field experience is super critical as a pillar. The next pillar is professional judgment. And this is really more professional judgment based on facts that can lead you to decision making. And I think a lot of times that might be something, this particular pillar might be very difficult to achieve. What recommendations would you have to a coatings inspector who, again, like I say, they're on that career pathway and they want to be a real recognized coatings inspector, what would you tell them on how to take the facts and arrive at an appropriate decision?
Just honesty to start with, and regardless of the pressure you're getting externally, internally, you have to do what's integrally correct, right? So, regardless of the situation, the facts are the facts. Search and determine your position based on the facts and the facts only, and be clear on that, and know what you don't know. Again, if there's areas of that you just don't have the answer to, you don't always have to have the answers. You need to know. You need to inform the people of the facts, of the stakeholders of the facts, and essentially, just stand up and have your position and make sure your position is clear, right? So,
yeah, definitely. Clarity is super critical. The next pillar for me is communication. Communication is super critical because if you don't have communication skills, things can happen. There could be misinterpretation that happens. There could be a certain amount of roughness that might happen between a contractor and you as an inspector. And then the next thing I think that also plays into the communication is related to the documentation, because that's a form of communication as well. What are some of the pitfalls that you see related to communication with inspectors?
I believe there's a lot of inspectors that are very rigid. They're very technically competent, but when it comes to communication, expressing themselves, they're challenged with that, because in some cases they can be, I won't say dry, but dry. I think that's one of the skills that I was fortunate to get going through my career, was the ability to communicate and be a value-added inspector. And that means that you're adding value to not only your client, you're adding value to the other side, the asset owner, the ship, whoever it is. They see you as an asset to the project, regardless of who's paying you, right? So the communication, when you say documentation, I would say, of course, making sure your documentation is clean, correct, concise, as it should be, and being able to communicate through email effectively, having sequencing of, making sure your documentation is clean and that you have a very clear, concise method of communication for your projects and the stakeholders within that project.
Yeah, another aspect on the communication side, that there are a lot of very unique, intelligent, let's say, coatings inspection systems when it comes to inspection. And I've seen a lot of amazing things when it comes to report writing that they can do, and they write the reports for you. So there are ways to definitely be able to, let's say, compensate for a deficiency you might have, that in the past where you were writing actual documents, if you weren't really clear, concise, or be able to communicate properly, it could be a misinterpretation. It could be a wrong read on something. And, well, wait a minute, I'm not quite sure what your inspection, what you came out, or what you're saying happened here. So it's important to also think of the resources and tools that are out there as well. Now, for me, the last pillar is what I've experienced in the field with great inspectors, where they are very well in tune with both what the owner is looking to achieve and having the presence and mindset of what an industrial painting contractor, what their operational that will be brought to bear, what's expected for production, and then also to some of the areas that they might lead a little bit of, I'm not going to say hand holding or anything like that, but maybe some extra attention, because a lot of times the great inspectors that are out there, they've worked with so many contracting operations, they get to know them really well, and they understand exactly where their strengths and weaknesses are, and they're being able to kind of compensate to be able to make a successful project happen. How critical is it for the inspector to understand the owner's perspective, but also understand what the contractor can, what they can bring to bear to a project?
No, it's paramount. You need to understand your client's needs and expectations and priorities. In order to do that, you also need to understand the contractor side as well and find that middle ground where you need to obviously deliver on the request of the owner, but also understand what's possible within that scenario and apply that and don't accept anything less. If you know that it's possible, that what the owner's asking for is fair and it can be achieved in a reasonable time within the project specification, then that's the position and the push as the inspector you should take. And, having that field experience, I always go back to that is, I think that's where it comes into play, right? It's like when the contractor says, well, we can't do that. We can't do that. There's always no time, no money, not in the spec. Well, let's talk about that, right? and you have a little sit down and you always find a pathway to meet the requirement and meet that expectation one way or another. So.
Yeah, speaking about expectations, really good timing on this question. People try to bend the standards, and there's a purpose most of the time behind misinterpretation. It's a really good one, because what I wanted to kind of talk about next is, there's a big difference between knowing the standard and knowing how to apply it, the standard in the field. And what I mean by that is sometimes you see a younger, more inexperienced inspector, or they might even be a technician, and they get out there to do the work, and they're literally too focused on meeting every letter, period, comma, colon, everything to the standard. But as you said earlier, and I've experienced myself, there's a big difference of what is on the standard and how it can actually truly be applied in the field. It's not, you have to be 100%, and understanding exactly how that area of give and take can happen in the field versus the standard is important. You probably experience that yourself, applying that standard in the field. Have you seen a lot of times where if you go by 100% letter of the law to the standard, that you might not be able to move forward in a project?
I've lived the pain many times. In ship repair, it's a very relevant topic. We're dealing with weather, especially on the West Coast here, right? Where you're trying to coat, you're trying to get a vessel out in 8-10 days, and you got rain for 5. Somehow the vessel still comes out in 10 days. That didn't just start happening now. That's been happening for many, many, many years, right? So, you're literally looking up at the sky, looking at your watch, waiting for that weather window. Okay, we're going to make it. We're going to have enough drying time before, all these different scenarios we're working through. But again, it goes back to the field experience. The standard is what the standard is, and it's very important that it must be followed to the best of the ability of the project, and understanding where the risk is. And if there is risk with not following that to 100%, then the owner, the specifier, the stakeholders need to be informed of what those risks are and how critical they may be moving forward down the road, because the failure won't happen now, it'll happen later potentially, right? So,
yeah. And the thing with it, when you think about it, if you're, hey, we're close enough, everything will work out. You could also catch it later too. In other words, when you're doing a lot of your, you're going through and you're doing your inspection and everything like that, you're going to be able to find if there is going to be a potential serious problem, right? And I've seen it, right? Mm-hmm. You might have a little bit of, there's some but you're out of your window, but you're close. But if you're too far out of your window, now all of a sudden you've got, anything from pinholing happening to, now it's sagging, it's running. There's so many things that can happen. But that experience in the field, you're like, hey, we're close, but I know we're going to be good. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also an important aspect of that field experience out there, to understand exactly if close is good enough, to understand that there's a great chance of success. There can be risk, but there's a risk with everything we do. You can't have zero risk. No. But to stick, unfortunately, a lot of times, if you stick 100% to the letter of law of a standard, you might not get the project really done in a timely manner. And
that said, there is projects that do require 100% compliance.
That's true.
And the owner will make the time and pay whatever it costs to do that. So I don't want to be confused that it's loose in every case, because let me get, for government projects, Navy, that's the expectation. The standard is the standard and you will meet it. And if you don't, then that's right. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you saving me on that one. Yeah, people could misinterpret what I was saying there, but no, you're 100% right. It really comes down to again, what that owner's expectation is.
Sure.
So let's move and talk about the certification versus real world competency. And what I want to kind of talk about is more or less exploring really the strength of professional certifications, in the aspect of them being structured learning. They really do standardize knowledge for our industry. And then when it comes to global recognition, you carry I-Core, you carry AMP certification, you have a lot of specialties that you have as well. For you, why is obtaining and maintaining these professional certifications super critical, not just to get the job, but for you as a professional?
Well, first of all, I've always followed my educational pathway. I've never stopped since I got into this. Like I said earlier, I got into the CIP, and I feel like every year I continue to do something, and I enjoy it, and that's the first and foremost. Secondly, I started with SSBC, NACE, obviously AMP now. And then I thought, okay, I started doing some work internationally, specifically with Seaspan. And I realized, okay, you got Frozio, you got I-Core in the UK, Frozio in different parts of the world, in Asia. And what's the difference, right? Like, why? To me, the end goal is the same, is to maintain quality, have standards, standardize the business. And so I really delved into that. And I'm glad I did, because, I learned a lot of different things on the respective certification bodies. Within Frozio, there's a lot about, the ISO standards. With I-Core, there's, I-Core is very, very interesting as well. Very difficult, actually, I will say. But yeah, no, it was, technically speaking, I think each certification body adds its own specific value, which is probably a lot to talk about here. But yeah, that's my experience is they all have their unique value added, and they're represented differently in depending on the geographical location of where the work's happening. So,
yeah, I think for me, because really the only true certification I can ever obtain is the protective coating specialist, which I do have that, but I've had the opportunity on, let's call it the coatings tech, like a technician type of thing, where you take a level 1. So I did take PCI level 1 and concrete coatings inspector level 1, and at best, I can operate the tools. I'm a technician. I can go out and do readings and things like that. And what I found was, by taking these different certifications, like when I took PCI, I'm like, okay, well, I know a lot about coatings and inspection and everything. So CCI, why do you need to do a concrete coatings inspector? And then I took it, and it was just as hard as the PCI. And I'm like, wow, this is totally night and day different. And yeah, there's some similarities or a little bit of crossover, but there's a lot that's different. So by taking these multiple, sometimes either through different associations or taking specialties, it really helps you identify the gaps that you have for knowledge and also ultimately experience. Because if I'm an owner and I have a concrete coatings inspection, that I need a concrete coatings inspector, and I go out to qualify an inspector and they've never done any concrete inspection work, I'm going to be very leery on wanting to have this be their first opportunity to cut their teeth on my big project.
of course.
So it's really beneficial for a professional to make sure that they expand their horizons. And maybe you're looking at, like you said, I-Core, you're looking at AMP, you're looking at other associations. And in addition to that, you're looking at specializing yourself too, so that you can make yourself more marketable, but also you're able to really kind of look for areas that you have a lack when it comes to both inspection and real world experience and things like that. So let me ask you this question, because I've encountered it before. I've had owners say this to me, is that they've encountered sometimes people who are certified but not ready. Have you run into people, and you don't have to name names, that were certified but they were not ready for the job that they were hired to do?
Absolutely. Certification gets you into the field. Experience teaches you how to make the decision in it, right? So, you've done the classroom work, you've done the theory, you've done the practical, you've put your shoes on, as far as I'm concerned. Now it's time to get out there, right? And so you need to go through the pain of, being uncomfortable, being in positions where you don't know, and going home and reflecting and working it backwards and saying, okay, what happened there? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? And learning from that and repeat that process for a few years. And eventually, you get a lot of lesson learned there, right? So I would say in this time we're in, I think specifically because in the US, Canada, North America, areas of the world, people are starting to really see the value in an experienced coding inspector, and others are seeing that, thinking it's like everything. They're perceiving it as a area of opportunity for themselves, right? Which they should. It doesn't mean that you just show up and take a course and now you're, a competent certified inspector, right? You have to get out there. You have to go through those challenges, and you have to make some poor decisions. I mean, it's part of it, right? You learn. It's just like life and everything we do. So, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I want to ask the audience, and feel free to post into comments this, have you ever worked with an inspector who was certified, but they're really struggling in the field? Again, don't name names, but if you've encountered it as well, because I think it's something important to talk about within the industry, especially in these times as we're transitioning into advanced technologies, advanced coding systems, and also higher expectations from an owner. Recently I had a conversation with someone who reached out on my YouTube channel, and they were, basically a decade as a truck driver, and they wanted to get into coatings inspection. And so the question was, hey, I can just get certified and become a coatings inspector. And I went, whoa, not so fast. That's not how it really works. Mm-hmm. And sat down and took time to kind of explain to them that really what they should consider is looking at, if they really truly want to go in the path of the inspector, one of the areas that we need a lot of the skilled trades is in the industrial painting and the contractor side. And I explained to him, what type of positions and the experience you can get as a industrial painter, but also going through the path of, through your employer, getting you C7 certified, C12 certified, getting, your CAS, getting all the different types of requirements that some owners do require, but a lot of contractors, in order to maintain maybe their QP certification or accreditation, they're going to have to put you through, because they're going to have crews that are well-trained, experienced, and also certified. But to look at that career path to go from the industrial painter to become a coatings inspector, in your opinion, and hopefully you're the same opinion as I am right here, is I feel that industrial painters who have experience over time make the best coatings inspectors out there. Am I wrong?
No, absolutely not. That's a very true statement. And again, when you're an industrial painter and you have that field experience and you've been in the trenches, technically, maybe at that point you don't know what's right, but as an applicator, generally what is right and wrong, and where you're pushing the envelope and where you're not. So when you transfer that, and when you add the technical competency to those skills, you have a very good mix and a well-rounded inspector for sure. And again, they're able to communicate on projects because they have that. They know what things take. They know how difficult some situations are for the contractor, so they can relate to that, really, right? So,
perfect. Now let's talk about inspection beyond DFTs and instrument readings. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, and maybe you have the same opinion, there are a lot of limitations to inspectors that are instrument only inspectors. Have you encountered that? Do you see that in the field where they rely too much on the instrumentation and not much on the practical and the experience to be able to come up with proper coatings inspection?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of R&D folks, lab, sometimes on the sales side, you see that where, they might be, again, it's lack of, practical experience, lack of that field experience, but they've got their cert. So, they've got a DFT gauge in their car. They come to a job, they start knocking DFTs in no random order, just no, and they come up with what their determination is based on their own opinion, I'll say. And yeah, I mean, you're relying on the tools, and some owners unfortunately will listen to that, right? And so yeah, you get in these situations where they're depending heavily on the tools rather than being able to understand how to decipher and determine what is actually acceptable or what should be rejected, right?
Yeah, and I think also too, when it comes to critical inspection skills, what's really important, anything from environmental monitoring, surface preparation verification. You're looking at anything from, soluble salts to contaminants to, proper was the proper surface preparation completed? One area too that I think is big, and I've had experience recently with an inspector really doing a real good attention to this, was the mixing, and then also the initial application, including to the point where before the initial application was to run basically a test panel before the application actually started. And I thought that's great to see an inspector doing that out there, to really observing, documenting, recording the mixing, but also we're going to spray a panel, make sure we're doing proper technique and everything. I thought that was pretty amazing. And then when back to documentation, I think the documentation clarity is super critical. Like I say, yes, there are tools and resources out there that are intelligent that can do the reporting for you. But again, if you're not subscribing to those or having those type of systems, then you're doing a manual process. So understanding proper documentation is very important. And then obviously, as you're kind of finalizing that project, understand, coding behavior, cure, and all those things. Are there any critical inspection skills that I might have missed that you would also recommend?
Yeah, I mean, you need to have the inspection tools to do the inspection, right? So a lot of inspection kit people, like, for example, high voltage holiday detecting. It's not something that's done, depending on what industry you're in. I mean, if you're in oil and gas, it's probably done very commonly, but I know on the marine side, not so much, right? So
sure,
when you're in front of tools that you're not familiar with, you need to understand, again, you don't learn, you get a very high level overview on your course when you're taking your training. When it's a lot different when you have the tool in your hand, and you need to understand how to use it and how to use it correctly, how to, extract the results, how to record the results, and how to eventually communicate the results. So, I would say, yeah, there's, and they are with technology, things are obviously evolving like they should with, the world of AI and how they apply in this business. So I would say, yeah, those are just, again, kind of knowing what you don't know. Again, working with different substrates, like you mentioned, concrete's a beast of its own, right? It's in terms of comparison against steel substrate, ferrous, non-ferrous substrates, concrete it's got its unique challenges, and that applies again in other areas as well, right? So
I say steel is easy, concrete is wild, wild west.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's fortunately I've had some opportunities to delve into some projects with concrete over my time as an inspector, and I continue to learn, and it's a living, breathing beast as far as I'm concerned, right? And you have to know how to approach it.
Yeah, here's a real good comment on here. When you're looking at inexperienced inspectors, who, they basically meet the minimum, but they need oversight and supervision. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important for, the owners out there and people who are hiring to understand the different levels when it comes to the certification of a coatings inspector, but also look at their work history. Again, as an inspector, you're probably logging, you're going to have some work history to be able to showcase projects that you've done to kind of strengthen exactly why you being hired, or if you're hired, why you're the proper person to do that inspection work. So I think that's a real good comment posted there. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Let's talk about developing judgment through mentorship and field exposure, because we've kind of singled in on the importance of in the field. And I would say that proper professional judgment is probably the hardest skill to teach. And I believe it comes from mentors. The mentors will really teach you how to have proper judgment, especially in the coatings inspection profession. And really, when we look at a mentor, they're going to be someone who can really kind of offer you some guidance, especially related to decision making, maybe exposure to, certain type of, projects that you might not have a lot of experience on. And I realize coatings inspectors really compete against each other. Everything should be fair and reasonable and everything like that. But I also do know and experience that protective coatings inspectors are their own community. They're part of the greater protective coatings community. But a lot of them are more than willing to kind of mentor and kind of offer some level of assistance. Have you had experience as a coatings inspector of having a mentor who could help you, guide you?
Oh, absolutely. I can honestly say that I wouldn't be in the position I'm in without the strong mentorship that I received early in my career, specifically when I departed my job with Seaspan and went out on my own. I was jumping off the diving board and I didn't really know how it was going to go, right? And that person was there at that time in my life to show me that just take the risk. I've done it for this many years and it's worked fine for me. And, you're going to have times that are not so good, but you're also going to have times that are very good. And, it's what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it, essentially. In terms of ethical, integral mentorship, that also served a very strong purpose for me too, because, this business essentially is built on integrity, right? You're an inspector. You must carry that integrity. And if you don't, like you said, it's a very small community of core professionals, both in US and Canada. You lose your credibility very quickly, right? So carry yourself high, you must maintain integrity in all cases. So.
Yeah. And another aspect with an experienced inspector is they do really help pass down that tribal knowledge.
Yeah.
And a lot of it goes back to the beginning of time. And, there are still aspects of coatings inspection. No matter what technology comes down the road, there'll still be that base tribal knowledge that will still exist forever. And so it's important to have that transferred. And, we see that in a lot of different careers and definitely in coatings inspection. Let's talk about industry collaboration and focus on building the next generation. In your opinion, because you are involved with ICOR, with AMP, I believe you're also the chapter president in Vancouver. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm the BC chapter chair for the AMPP chapter over here. Yeah.
So how can certifying bodies, how can they evolve training to include more field-based competency?
Well, that's a good point. We're actually have an initiative between AMP, myself, and the local Finishing Trades Institute and the local painters union, DC 38. We've prior to COVID, they had a good momentum going with CIP training. They have the facilities there. Obviously, with COVID, things died off and never really revitalized. So my position within the AMPP BC chapter, I was in a position to connect the dots again and push AMP, push DC 38 to connect again. And we're in the process of that now, which we're planning. It's about the visibility. It's about planning, giving the membership and non-members as well the opportunity to enroll in training, open enrollment, get involved, participate, see the opportunities, right? And so I think there's some good synergy there industry-wide on our side right now. And we're going to continue to push that forward.
Yeah, and the other thing too, being in Pittsburgh, I work a lot with John Economos here in Pittsburgh. A generational family ownership over 100, maybe almost 120 years now. Been in the business, probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest, existing industrial painting contractors in the United States.
Mhm.
What I found their success is that they do have, structured onboarding. They look at their teams and making sure that their teams have rotations that make sense to kind of help. They are union, so they also obviously do rely on IUPAT trained and certified workers as well. So, I mean, it's good to have that to kind of balance. And then the other thing is that they also do support performance-based, results and things like that. So I think it's a critical too that the role of the certifying body is to get more field-based competency developed, but also too, every contractor who's successful, they really are well in tune to have a good structured training, skills-based experience type of program. And then the other thing I think a lot of times is that asset owners, and I'm seeing more of this today, I think they really do understand because they're seeing a reduction sometimes when it comes, especially to industrial painters, is that there's not a ton of companies out there doing a lot of work. And probably the same in Canada, here in the United States. And there are certain entities that you rely a lot on too. But to more or less set realistic expectations, but also to look at having a relationship with their contracting base out there. They might have 4 or 5 contractors they work with. To have a little bit more tighter of a relationship. Yes, it's contractual. Yes, they have to keep a separation and not be too heavily involved, but it's best for them and for the contractor if they do collaborate together. Are you seeing any of that, especially in Canada? Are you seeing any of that happening?
Oh yeah, we have. My experience is the contractors want to train their people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're constrained by lack of people. First of all, they need people to do the work, or they're not in business, so they can't train. So there's a shortage of skilled workers, I would say, across not only the coating sector but many sectors in Canada. The government's got various programs which they're trying to push forward to try and close those gaps. But in terms of training, I think the industry just needs to create the opportunities for the industrial painting contractors, and that, it's the old saying, if you build it, they will come, right? I know exactly that's the scenario here. I hear it all the time as the chapter chair. I get inquiries daily saying, we want this training or that training, and we just don't have the resources internally to do that. So there's challenges for those folks, and I think our job as the industry is we need to support them, right, and help them grow and help the industry grow. And that's why I volunteer my time with the AMPP chapter as the chair. Is, look, I feel like I have a good network. I'm quite connected in certain areas, and I enjoy connecting the dots and trying to, open up doors for people in these scenarios where they maybe don't have what they need to, in terms of certification and training.
Yeah. Here's a really good question also too. Some of the fabricators just want inspectors without integrity. So if you do the right thing, then they find someone else who can sign the report. How do you reveal these clients? A lot of times, in my experience has been that if shoddy work is coming out of the shop, that's a clear pathway to get yourself out of doing work for somebody.
Yeah.
And to me, I think if you're doing that as an owner, as a paint shop, for example, Aston Paint Shop, if you're doing that, or a fabricator, man, you really are kind of cutting your nose off to spite your face.
No, I think if you've made all the efforts as the inspector to find that middle ground, and they're still pushing, and it's, consistently compromising quality blatantly, then you have to ask yourself, maybe you're working for the wrong employer, right?
And that's a great point. It's a really, really good point on that. And the last industry collaboration partner to build the next generation takes us back to the coatings inspector, because the coatings inspector really is going to be a great opportunity for the mentoring. We talked about the coaching going on, but also too, the experienced inspectors will be able to work with the asset owners, work with the contractors, work with the trade associations out there to say, hey, these are things that we need to change within either skills-based training and certification for the craft worker or for the inspector. Here are things like we've seen a big revision, obviously, when the merger happened between SSPC and NACE. And it was like, okay, we have PCI from SSPC, we got CIP. No brainer that CIP was going to exist. It was the most recognized and largest global certification out there for coatings inspector. And what happened? You started to see, hey, let's look at the best of both programs. Let's look at things that we need to change. And let's go ahead and make a big evolutionary step change. And we've seen it. A big change happen. And for the betterment, I believe, of the industry. And so that's important because a lot of that was driven by experienced and seasoned inspectors that were bringing back information from the field and incorporating it into the newer revisions of the training and certification programs. You probably experienced that too, starting off when you were even younger professional. I know you're a young professional still, but even as a younger professional, you've probably seen a great change in a lot of the certification programs.
Oh, absolutely. I felt earlier on in my career, SSPC at that time was very, very good at the applicator training. And then, like the blasting, the coating, the field work, where there was a tremendous amount of value in that. Whereas NACE at that time was very focused on the technical part, inspection. And when they brought those two together, I think it was a good mix. Of course, people have different views on that, but I mean, something we have to evolve, right? I mean, the merger happened, and we need to. Some things need to change. You know, I was a victim of the merger as well. I mean, I had SSPC level 1, 2, 3, which essentially vanished, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I spent my time, I spent my resources. Yeah, I'm over that. I mean, there's value. I got value in it as I grew in the industry. So it's part of my journey, right? Yeah.
Definitely part of your journey. Dylan, we're going to close out this live stream. We've had a really great conversation, and I want to focus on talking about the competency imperative. And the one takeaway from this conversation that we had tonight is that certification is a starting line, and competency gets you to the finish line. And competency is something that you don't achieve. You continuously improve it. You work on it. You have to go through additional trainings and education and experiences, because the more you do that, the more your competency will continue to grow. And I want to also to encourage the protective coatings community to get more involved into mentorship. Find that next generation out there, talk to them, explain to them the career paths that are available. If you want to go from, working at fast food and you want to get into the trade union and you want to work your way up as a blaster painter and work your way into becoming an inspector, or if you are a seasoned person and you decide, hey, I want to go from, working in the coatings industry and apply myself and get certified as an inspector, do jobs, gain experience. We really do need to do more talking with people out there. And that's really, for me, the biggest takeaway, I think, from the conversation tonight. Dylan, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would want to kind of close out this live stream?
No, I just think that the time is now, really. There's some folks on this call right now. A lot of them are good friends of mine, colleagues, and I've never seen the momentum like it is now, both in Canada and US, in terms of asset integrity, investment into the country's infrastructure projects, both on the marine side, bridge and highways, oil and gas. So if you want to get involved, do it and make a decision, go for it, get out there, get some field level experience and progress, right? And stick to it, do the work. There was many nights where I stayed home studying with my head in a book while my friends are out enjoying themselves, right? And that's what it takes. If you want it, and you got to be consistent, and you need to do the work, right? So again, I'm very happy to be here, and I joined it's been a good discussion, Jim, and thank you for those who attended, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight.
Think about that. You did all that work just to watch paint dry.
Yeah, it's just paint, right?
Just paint. I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
I try to explain to sometimes some members of my family what I do, and their eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
They it's amazing to see that, we work kind of in a profession that a lot of times people just don't truly appreciate or understand what a lot of people are doing in our industry.
It's an exciting. There's exciting. Like you say, the products are becoming very niche and specialized and high performance, and on the marine side, it's very much about the performance, the coating, rather than the coating itself, right? Like so there's a lot of metrics and data behind it, and very interesting. And I continue to learn every day. So it's a rewarding industry.
Thank you for your comment here and watching, and make sure too, everyone, you guys like and share this conversation with colleagues or anyone in the industry that would get a lot of value out of this. Dylan, how can people get in contact with you, follow you, all kind of good stuff like that?
Look, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. Other than that, I mean, I've got my email. You're more than welcome to share that, Jim, with the crowd, with the attendees. I'd be happy to connect on any questions you may have, and expand my network. That's why I'm here as well, right? Like just as much as it's an opportunity for the listeners, it's an opportunity for me to connect with my peers and hear what's going on out there, right? And that's why I'm here tonight. And obviously, I would never pass up the opportunity to sit with Mr. Jim Kunkle, the legend. So it's been a very interesting, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity.
You honor me, and I really greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dylan. Everyone, please have a good rest of your evening, your morning or afternoon, no matter where in the world you're watching this live stream. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.